Hi, and thank you for joining me for my third episode of Bible Talk with Dr. Steve. I'm Dr. Steve, and today I want to spend a few minutes talking with you first about how to choose a Bible translation. And second, we'll take a look at Isaiah 63:1 and an important word that is found in the Hebrew manuscripts, that is the Masoretic text, that scholars argue is a scribal error. To correct what they see as this textual mistake, most English translations of Isaiah 63:1 put forth an alternative word rather than translating what is found in the earliest copies of the Hebrew text, dating as far back as the Dead Sea Scroll, which dates to around 125 years before Jesus was born. So, if you want to grab a Bible, open it up to Isaiah 63. Now's the time to do it. Put me on pause, grab a piece of paper and something to write with in case you want to write down the Bible verses I mentioned. I always encourage people to study the text for themselves. It can be helpful, surely, to have someone to help guide you through the text, because the Bible can be a bit confusing and perhaps even overwhelming, and nothing takes the place of personal study. Remember the Bereans in Acts 17:11? They were more noble-minded than some other believers up north because they both listened with eagerness, which means they really wanted to learn what was being taught, and two, they would go home and examine the scriptures daily to see if what Paul was saying about the scriptures was as he said it was. And further, to examine the scriptures means to investigate them, to study them carefully, to cross-examine and interrogate them. The one who approached the scriptures and the teachings of scriptures in this way were considered by Paul to be more noble-minded. And what the heck does it mean to be noble-minded? Being noble-minded means to have a commendable attitude, to be open-minded and without prejudice. To be prejudiced is to prejudge something, to draw a conclusion before gaining all the facts or the relevant information. So, according to the book of Acts, the more noble-minded believers not only listened with eagerness, but they were having a daily practice of studying the scriptures, not just reading them, but studying them to see if what Paul was teaching was defensible. All right, so let's get going and see what the Bible teaches me on this very fine day. Now, as you may very well know, the Bible was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew with a little bit of Aramaic, and the New Testament was written in Greek, which means if you are not reading the Bible in these languages, you are reading a translation of the Bible rather than the Bible itself. Certainly, a number of Bible versions do a great job of translating the Bible. However, it is important to keep in mind that translations are put together by individuals, or more often a team of individuals whom you do not know. I would say trust, but verify. What is true in biblical times remains true today. Individuals are not perfect, and individuals living in communities can be influenced by the culture of their day, just as individuals in biblical times were influenced by their cultures, something that we'll talk about in the future. For now, just consider that individuals have biases, and I believe those biases can creep into the biblical translations. What is beautiful about the Bible is that you can go back to the original languages of the text and open up a discussion about whether or not any given translation or version of the Bible seems to reflect accurately what the original intention of the text was. If the original languages of the Bible are outside your present knowledge base, that's okay. However, I would encourage you, if this is the case, to get to know the Bible through the lens of more than one translation. Again, the actual Bible was not written in English. In fact, English was not a known language until like 500 years after Jesus. But if English is your language, great. Just pick 3 different English Bibles and start comparing the different translations. And I would offer this background on picking Bible versions. First, there are 3 popular categories of Bibles. Word-for-word translations. Some call these translations wooden literal translations, such as the New American Standard Bible, the New King James Version, or the English Standard Version. The second category is a thought-for-thought translation, also called a dynamic equivalency, such as the New International Version, the New Revised Standard Version, or the New Living Translation. The third category of the Bible is a paraphrase, like the contemporary English Version, the Message, or the Living Bible. So, I would encourage you to pick at least one version from each of these categories: a word-for-word translation, a dynamic equivalency translation, and a paraphrase. Because looking at more than one version of the biblical text in more than one category will help you to remember that any English version of the Bible is someone's translation of an ancient text written in a language that predates English itself, and human bias may very well sneak in uninvited. Reading multiple versions can help you detect inadvertent biases. All right, here I would love to ask for your feedback. Please let me know in the comments below if you've ever thought about English as not even existing in Jesus' day. And 2, which version or versions of the Bible do you like to study? And 3, do you see the benefits of reading more than one English version of the Bible? I appreciate any comments. If you have a topic you would like me to talk about, again, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you like my channel, I'd love it if you hit the like button. All right, so now, if you allow me, I will walk you through what I believe is an example of how a bias or popular culture has influenced the biblical translation of a passage about the warrior God in Isaiah 63. I believe this passage and how it was translated has contributed in part, or perhaps is a reflection of, a view of God not as a humble, meek, sacrificial lamb, the one who rides into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday on a young donkey, but rather as a mighty, manly, take no prisoners kind of God. Let me start by reading to you Isaiah 63:1 using the New American Standard Bible Version. Please focus on the word marching, which comes in the second half of the verse. Who is this from Edom who comes with garments of glowing colors from Bozrah? This one who is majestic in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. So, is this a correct and fair translation of what the Bible is teaching? The New American Standard Translation team says yes, and they would argue it reflects the idea of a warrior God. However, let's look at the Bible in its original language, in the Masoretic text, which is corroborated in the text of the Dead Sea Scrolls that dates back, as I said earlier, as far back as 125 years before Jesus. The Hebrew text of the Bible in Isaiah 63:1 does not use the word for marching, which is za'ad, with a D at the end, za'ad. Rather, the Bible uses in Isaiah 63:1 the Hebrew word for stooping down or bending, za'ah, with an H sound at the end. So the biblical Hebrew reads, "Who is this who is coming from Edom in crimson garments from Bozrah? This one splendid in apparel, stooping down in his great might. It is I, speaking in righteousness, mighty to save." So, the Bible says this one from Edom, splendidly dressed, is stooping down or bending in his might, not marching in his might. Why does this matter? It matters a lot because it gives the impression, when reading the rest of the immediate passage, verses 1 to 6, that God is a ruthless warrior. By reading Isaiah 63:1 as evidence of a warrior God, without the mitigating influence of the actual text as it has been preserved, that is, without retaining the Lord stooping down in the midst of his judgment, gives a lopsided impression of who the Lord is. By arguing, as many have, that the preserved text in Isaiah 63:1 is wrong due to scribal error, the reader is not given the opportunity to see the anguish inherent in the Hebrew text, recounting the moment when a loving father rebukes his disobedient children. So why is this? Well, it's a long story, and we can cover it more thoroughly in the future if you're interested. But the short version is, a guy from Oxford in the 1700s thought a warrior god would not stoop down. Therefore, he thought marching made more sense, and consequently, so have a lot of others, following Robert Loth's lead. However, there are a number of more recent scholars who are arguing for the original text to be preserved and translated. Many of the scholars who agree with Loth argue that Isaiah 63:1 is an example of a scribal error because the H in Hebrew looks like the D in Hebrew, only with an extra stroke. That is, of course, an oversimplification, and I do agree that there are clear scribal errors in the Bible. I just do not think Isaiah 63:1 is one of them. As far as the warrior god not stooping down, I would simply ask the question, why not? I do not think stooping down is ipso facto a sign of weakness. Think about this. Imagine a warrior fighting a battle and then returning home in his blood-stained armor. He approaches his house, and his young daughter, whom he has not seen in months, looks up and sees this blood-stained, exhausted, fierce warrior coming towards her. Is he somehow less of a warrior because he stoops down and says, "Honey, Daddy's home. Let me get cleaned up"? Certainly not. Who among us would doubt the strength of God? I believe he is as powerful as any mighty warrior, but, and I would emphatically defend, that he is also a loving and caring father. And this is intentionally noted in the verse by this particular word that has been preserved in the Masoretic text. By translating this single word differently than what is preserved in the original Hebrew text, the reader misses the importance of the Lord's kindness within the context of his judgment. This picture, I argue, of a loving father, even in the midst of his judgment, is developed within the larger context of Isaiah 59 to 64. Notice in particular Isaiah 63:7. This verse speaks of the Lord's kindnesses. If Isaiah 63, 1 to 6, the immediate context of verse 1, was speaking only about the Lord's wrath, why would the first response of the people to this warrior God be, in the very next verse, "I will remember the kindnesses of the Lord"? In my estimation, failing to translate the original Hebrew as it has been preserved overlooks a crucial component of who God is, namely a kind and loving father. I argue that the Lord's primary characteristic is his kindness. And if you continue on this journey with me, I promise to unfold for you why I believe the Lord's kindness both undergirds and pervades all of Scripture. In Isaiah 63:1, God is not only a warrior God, but he is also a kind, compassionate, and loving God. This is what the Bible teaches me about Isaiah 63:1. If you have a different word that you would use to first describe the Lord, let me know what it is in the comments below. Perhaps that will lead to an interesting and fruitful discussion. In the next episode, we'll take a look at the Great Commission in Matthew 28, 19 to 20, and what portion of it I believe is overlooked by many churches and churchgoers. All right? Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of my YouTube channel, Bible Talk with Dr. Steve. If you want to send me notes, subscribe, awesome. If you have any questions or topics you would like to talk about, let me know in the comments below, and we'll go through those in the future. For now, thank you for joining me. I'm Dr. Steve, and this is Bible Talk with Dr. Steve. All right, peace.